Sanctum is directed by Alistair Burson, and it stars Richard Roxburgh, Ian Griffith, Rhys Wakefield, and Alice Parkinson. This film was released back in February, and it's one of those films where I saw the trailer, was interested, and then it came out and it got shit reviews, and unlike Skyline, I avoided seeing this movie and decided to wait for it to be released on DVD. I rented it, and I can say that it was actually worth the rental. This is based on a true story of an underwater cave diving team who experiences a life-threatening crisis during an expedition to the unexplored and least accessible cave system in the world. The film starts out where you are introduced to all of the main players. We never really get to know any of these characters all that in depth, so when the obligatory set of death sequences begin to happen, you don't really care as much because you don't know who they are. None of the relationships are very believable, and nobody really is all that excited to be in this movie, at least it didn't look like it. As I was watching this movie, I was thinking to myself, what about this movie makes people dislike it? And it's not very hard to see. Based on my observations, that pretty much everyone in this movie is an asshole. There's not that one person who's optimistic about, fighting for survival. Granted, they're not always assholes. I mean, they work together as a team to try and survive, but in the beginning and towards the end, they all just kind of snap and have their moments of, F you, I'm getting out of here. This movie doesn't really drag very long. It's actually kind of paced well. I mean, there are certain moments that are okay. The last 15 minutes were bearable, and the acting isn't all terrible throughout. I think Richard Roxburgh was probably the best actor, even though he was one of the biggest assholes. Another thing that I think people found disinteresting about this film is that none of the actors here are very well known. We have a couple here, maybe Ian Griffith, who's from Fantastic Four among other films, and then you have Richard Roxburgh, who was in Mission Impossible 2, the only film that I know of him being in. And it's kind of hard to relate to or care about these characters if you don't really know who they are, as actors, because when you bring in, people who are not known to audiences worldwide, kind of like they do for Final Destination, where these are fresh actors, we don't know a majority of them, and so you could really care less when they die, even though it's based on a true story, which really didn't add anything to the overall experience of watching it. I mean, they remind you in the beginning of the film that this is based on a true story, but as they go through, you just kind of forget, because it's just like, this is such a generic cave diving movie about survival. I mean, there's nothing overly spectacular about it. It's just, another one of those movies where people go in, they're trying to get out, people die along the way, and that's it. I mean, of course there's that one guy who always gets out who's been fighting his entire way, and you've got the obligatory fight scene where this one guy gets really pissed off and finally just breaks, and he kind of goes after the main guy, and it's just nothing all that special. The underwater scenes were actually pretty decent. They were photographed well, shot well. You can tell that this movie is shot on a stage just really easily, because the coverage and just the way they walk around the place, it's easy to tell that this was not filmed in the actual location of where they're diving. So it's very easy to point out little things here and there, like oh, they must be swimming underwater in a studio right now, things like that. I am giving Sanctum 2.5 out of 5 stars. If anyone out there has not seen this movie yet, rent it if you want to. I don't think it's anything that you need to avoid completely. I mean, it's not a horrible movie, it's just kind of generic.